I'm Ann Dark.
I'm Tracy Stormy.
And I'm Kathy Knight.
And together we are
It Was a Dark and Stormy Book Club,
a podcast for mystery lovers.
Welcome.
If you enjoy our show, please consider contributing to the Dark and Stormy Patreon. By becoming a patron, you will help us create better and quality content. There are also benefits to becoming a patron, such as exclusive content and Dark and Stormy merchandise. Become a supporter at patreon.com/darkandstormybc. Check our website for the link. We appreciate any and all contributions. Thank you.
Welcome to episode 134 of Dark and Stormy Book Club. On today's episode, we will have an interview with Mark Billingham.
Mark Billingham is one of the UK's most acclaimed and popular crime writers. A former actor, television writer, and stand-up comedian, his series of novels featuring T.I. Tom Thorne has twice won him the Crime Novel of the Year award, as well as the Sherlock Award for Best British Detective, and has been nominated for 7 CWA Daggers. His standalone thriller, In the Dark, was chosen as one of the 12 best books of the year by The Times, and his debut novel, Sleepyhead, was chosen by the Sunday Times as one of the 100 books that had shaped the decade. Each of his novels has been a Sunday Times top 10 bestseller. Mark lives in London with his wife and 2 children. Crybaby is number 17 in the Tom Thorne mystery series. In the summer of 1996, 2 boys run from a playground into the adjoining woods, but only one comes out. D.S. Tom Thorne takes on a case that quickly spirals out of control when 2 people connected with the missing boy are murdered. As London prepares to host the European Soccer Championships, Thorne fights to keep on top of a baffling investigation while also dealing with the ugly fallout of his broken marriage. A prequel to Billingham's acclaimed debut, Sleepyhead, this compelling novel highlights the case that shaped the career of one of British crime fiction's most iconic characters.
We would like to welcome Mark Billingham to the program. He is the author of the Tom Thorne mystery series. Welcome, Mark.
Well, very nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Mark, why don't you give us a rundown of the Tom Thorne series for our listeners who are not familiar?
Okay, well, the Tom Thorne series began back in 2001. Lord, near 20 years ago, almost, with a novel called Sleepyhead. That was my first novel. I didn't know back then I was still going to be writing about him 2 decades later. But back then, everybody wanted series. The first question every publisher who wanted to publish the book asked me was, is this the start of a series? So I went, yes, of course it is. Absolutely. Thinking, oh, crikey, I better write some more about this guy. So I wrote, a bunch more Thorne novels, maybe 4, 5, 6 of them, thinking on my feet. And here I am 20 years later, still writing about him. I've taken breaks from the series. It hasn't been one Tom Thorne book after another. I've written 3 or 4 standalone novels. I think that's the way to keep a series fresh. I hope it is. I've learned that from the best, from the likes of Michael Connolly, who, take a break, do something else, maybe branch off into another series, and then you can come back to your main guy fired up with a bit more enthusiasm. That's the plan anyway. So that's what I've been doing for the best part of 20 years. And here I am in 2020 with a novel called Crybaby, which, because it's the 20th book, I guess I wanted to do something a bit special. So it's a prequel to that first book, Sleepyhead. I've taken Tom back in time to the mid-90s to try and see what made him that copper I created back in 2001.
Kathy here actually got a chance to read it. The 2 of us did not, and she really enjoyed it.
Yes, it was kind of fun to go back to the mid-90s and be reminded of the culture at the time.
Yeah. I mean, the weird thing was it felt like it's a time I remember really well. I mean, it's not that long ago, but you've only got to go back 15, 20 years before you're writing a historical novel. And it certainly felt like that because of all the technology. I mean, that's the main thing. So I'm writing about a time when if you wanted to find your way around, you used an A to Z or whatever you call those in America. If you wanted to get pictures developed, you took a film to the chemist shop, And this is pre-internet and mobile phones everywhere. And that's the kind of stuff that makes my job as a crime writer quite hard, writing contemporary crime fiction. So to be able to go back to a time when that stuff didn't exist, when the most advanced bit of kit my detective has is a pager, was really exciting. And I enjoyed writing about him as a younger man, as a husband and as a son of two parents who are both still alive. I haven't been able to do that in the series. That was a real thrill.
So did you have to constantly check on the internet whether something was available at that time while you were writing, like, oh, I can't include that because...
Yeah, I had to do a bit of that. And I worked very closely with an ex-detective called Graham Bartlett, who helps out quite a lot of crime writers. He's worked with writers like Peter James and Andy Griffiths and myself. And he was a serving officer back then, so he was incredibly helpful. You know, there's a moment in the book where the police are using a kind of really early portable telephone in these woods. And he was able to send me a picture of one of these things, which just looks like the kind of thing it would take two people to carry, you know, this huge lump of metal with a curly wire. You can have a lot of fun with hindsight. So, of course, Thorne is looking at these things and going, well, you know, these flipping mobile telephones are never going to catch on. You know, all that sort of stuff. I had a lot of fun writing it.
Your Tom Thorne series and one of your standalone novels were adapted into television series. Having an acting background yourself, did this possibly influence you when you began your writing crime fiction?
Yes, I think coming from a performance background has been hugely influential on the books. I should say straight off the bat, I think writing a novel is a performance. It's just a different kind of performance than standing up on a stage doing Shakespeare or in a comedy club doing stand-up comedy, which are the things I'd done previously. But it is a performance. You've got to engage your audience quickly. You've got to keep them entertained. All those things I learned when I was back being a stand-up. And I think in terms of creating character, it's an acting exercise. You're stepping in different people's shoes. You're trying to make your characters as engaging and well-rounded as possible. So absolutely, all those previous careers, which were a concerted effort to avoid a proper job, have fed into the books very much, I think.
Did your contacts in the industry help with creating the TV series?
No, not at all. I mean, I used to write a bit for television. No. I went through exactly the same process as everybody else, which is the books get optioned. And of course, every book gets optioned. So you don't get too excited about it. They take you out for a nice lunch once or twice, then you forget about it. And then one day you get a call going, yep, this is happening. We've got this actor. We're greenlit. Off we go. You know, the two different adaptations, one for Sky and one for the BBC, were not without difficulty for me. I mean, I was involved to a degree which maybe you shouldn't be. I know some people think the best thing to do is just to, I don't know who said it first, but they throw a bag of money over the wall, you throw your book over the wall, and then you both run away in opposite directions. Because that way it's a win-win. You know, if it turns out to be rubbish, you can go, nothing to do with me. And if it turns out to be brilliant and wins a hatful of awards, you can go, that's my book, you know. I was involved. I didn't write the screenplays, but I was looking at the scripts at every stage and giving notes. I was very closely involved in the casting, which I think is hugely important. And I loved all the adaptations. I'm as influenced by television as I am by anything I've ever read. So yeah, to see the books adapted for the screen was hugely exciting.
Well, how important do you think it is to inject some humor into your novels, which they can be kind of dark without it?
Oh, you're absolutely right. It's massively important. I can't read anything that doesn't have humor in it, and I certainly couldn't write anything. Certainly if you're writing crime fiction, without some humor, it would be irredeemably bleak. It would be incredibly bleak. I have very strong comedic instincts anyway, you know, as a former comedian. I'm always thinking of gags and then having to stop myself putting them in. You know, it's not that kind of book. But there are moments when, especially in the relationship between Tom Thorne and Phil Hendricks, which is, continues throughout the whole series, that's when I get my comedy jollies a little bit and I can put a joke or two in. But, you know, when you hang out with police officers, with paramedics, the kind of people that work in these terrible jobs where they're surrounded by grief and death and pain and loss, that is where you see gags flying about. They use black humor all the time as a coping mechanism. Yeah, I try and put as much humor as I can get away with in the books.
You've said that this has been a 20-year almost journey with Tom for you.
Yeah.
Lee Child has recently decided to turn his writing of the Jack Reacher character over to his brother because he got tired of the character. Do you have an ending in mind for Tom, or do you think this is going to be a relationship that'll last for years and years?
Well, it'll certainly last as long as I'm still interested in him. By the way, I don't think Lee has taken this break because he's tired of Reacher. I just think he wants to retire. He wants to travel the world without having to do book events, engage in all the different hobbies he's got. I'd love to do that when the time comes, but it hasn't come for me yet. I'm still hugely interested in Tom, and I think one of the reasons is because I have no idea what's going to happen to him in the next book, let alone, 10 years from now. I've never had a plan from him. I've never had a dossier of facts on him. The reader knows every bit as much about Tom Thorne, book on book, as I do. There is no more to know. So as long as he stays unpredictable and interesting, then I'll be very happy to write about him.
Well, we hope you do, because this sounds right up my alley.
Oh, it is.
Good.
Having said that, I love the character of Phil Hendricks, by the way.
Oh, thank you. I love writing about him and about Tom Thorne. But he's based kind of on a real person who, back in 2000, when I was writing that first book, I needed to know a bit more about this central conceit, which was, I read this book about locked-in syndrome, this terrible condition where, you're trapped in your own body and you can't move. And I wondered, in that twisted way that wannabe crime writers do, could you do this to somebody on purpose? And at the time, my wife, who's a TV director, she was directing a medical drama called Casualty. And she said, why don't you come and meet a medical advisor who's an amazing guy called Phil Coburn with tattoos and piercing. I met this guy and he was incredible, and he became the basis for Phil Hendricks.
Very cool. Well, there's quite a few books in the series. Has Tom ever been placed in a predicament in the book that you were wondering how would you get him out of?
Yes, well, many times. Probably the worst is in a book called The Bones Beneath. And it's very difficult to talk about without giving massive spoilers, but he has the worst decision, the most difficult decision he's ever had to make in that book, where he has to choose between, I guess, what you'd call justice and the life of a friend. So that is a very tricky one for him. But yeah, I'm constantly putting him in horrible situations. That's what we do to these characters, which means that Tom, I hope, is not the same character at the end of one book, let alone at the end of 20 books. We can't put these people through the sort of grief and death and violence and so on that we heap upon them book on book, year on year, without them changing. And as long as he still changes, that's something that I want to write about.
Some authors feel that their readers know the protagonist better than they do. Do you ever take suggestions from your readers and work that into your books?
Not directly. I understand why readers feel that. One of the things I've always been careful to do is not really to describe Tom, so that readers have their own idea of who he is, what he looks like. I mean, I remember when the Sky series was about to air and we showed a big trailer at the Edinburgh International Book Festival, and the lights went down and we showed this sort of 10-minute trailer, and I was really proud of it. And we had this amazing actor called David Morrissey playing Tom Thorne, and the lights went up and I said, so what do you think? And a woman at the front just went, he's too tall. People have very fixed ideas about characters and they feel a sense of ownership of them, which is absolutely fine. And I completely respect that. Yeah, the characters are as much the readers as they are mine. But that doesn't mean that when they email me going, I think you should do that. I don't think Tom should be with her. I think he should split up with her and go out with her. I think he should be honest with himself and set up shop with Phil Hendricks or whatever they're suggesting to me. Doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to do it. I do listen to reader feedback very carefully, yeah.
Well, we do get very invested in our characters. I'm telling you that right now.
So do I. I mean, I'm a reader first and foremost, and I'm absolutely the same. I'm very wary when there's a screen adaptation of a character that I'm really fond of. Of course we are. People get massively attached to characters. A friend of mine, Karen Slaughter, once killed off one of the major characters in her book. Won't say who it is. And I remember reading that book on a beach and going, oh my Lord, what have you done? And kind of, emailing her immediately going, are you sure about this? And years later, she still gets abuse from it. I was in an elevator with her at a BoucherCon at a World Mystery Convention a few years ago. And somebody stepped into the elevator and saw the name on her badge and saw that it was her and went, what did you do? She's furious that she'd killed one of her.
Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, when he killed off Sherlock, he had to end up bringing him back.
Yeah, people wearing black armbands on the streets of London. I mean, that's a fantastic compliment, isn't it, to the power of that character and the importance it had in people's lives. I mean, one of my favorite facts about Sherlock Holmes, who was the first, mystery character I fell in love with. To this day, there is somebody employed full-time to answer the letters that are written to Sherlock Holmes. I love that. And I don't think these people that are writing letters to Sherlock Holmes genuinely believe he used to exist, but that they think the world would be a better place if he did. I kind of love that.
It escapes me, but somebody wrote a mystery series based on that. I can't remember the gentleman's name, but they wrote a whole mystery series based on the letters that came in.
Oh, okay.
I'll tell you a little secret. For myself, I'm so invested in some of these characters. John Sanford writes the Lucas Davenport series, sure. And I have the hugest crush on Lucas Davenport.
Yeah, I get similar kind of emails from people who are in love with Tom or who want to send me, and they do send me CDs of music that they think he would love. And that's, that's nice. Who doesn't want to get some free CDs? And it's nice that people have taken the character to their hearts,
Are you a big country music fan?
I'm a massive country music fan. Oh, yeah.
Wow.
That was a huge surprise for me when I was reading the book.
Well, do you know what? I mean, country music seems to me to be the perfect accompaniment to crime fiction because the stories that these songs tell, proper country music I'm talking about, Hank Williams and Johnny Cash and George Jones, Merle Haggard, those songs are very, very dark. They're very dark stories about loss and grief and pain, but they're all wrapped up in this incredibly entertaining package that we can sing along with and hum